What is up, everyone? Crunchy Frog here with another video today, and today I wanted to give a formal review of the new Forza Horizon 5 Hot Wheels DLC. So as you may know, this came out on July 19th, and I apologize, it's taken me about 4 weeks to get this out. I've been really trying to play it enough and get a good enough overall feel such that I can give you guys a complete review as opposed to a first look or first impression video. This is going to be the first in a series of reviews I'm going to do when new games come out. I'm going to try to play it a decent amount and give you guys a nice solid preview, especially for those of you that have been on the fence, haven't bought it yet. Hopefully give you enough information on whether you should or should not get the game, or maybe, if it's worth picking up if you bought it already but just haven't played it. So I apologize if the formatting is all over the place. I'm trying to get a solid plan down for these. So basically the way I'm going to start it off is list some pros, some cons of the DLC or games in future videos, and then break down a couple categories and give kind of arbitrary scores. It wouldn't be a review without those scores, right? And then finally give you a wrap up, a nice conclusion there, and really just give my thoughts on whether the game is worth getting. In this case, this is DLC, so if the expansion is worth purchasing, and kind of go from there. So to kick off the video, we'll go over the pros, right? We'll start off on a positive note. So the first thing to note is this game looks absolutely beautiful. As good as Forza Horizon 5, the base game, looks, especially on new-gen hardware such as the Series X and S consoles, this DLC just looks absolutely incredible. The base game is heavily rooted in reality, obviously, and the new graphical improvements of this game just really excel in a more fantasy-like setting, right? With the Hot Wheels tracks that are kind of translucent in the sun, some of the crazy vistas and landmarks that they have in the game just really shine through with, the new graphical fidelity that Forza Horizon 5 brought. And that kind of ties in with my next point, that the overall setting is very unique. I know in Forza Horizon 3, the last time they did the Hot Wheels expansion, it was also a very nice place to be, but it still felt like you were kind of in Australia. Just they slapped some more Hot Wheels tracks around. This one is a very unique setting. You're essentially on hovering islands, and some of the sound effects they have almost give the impression that they're somehow being held up by jets or boosters, kind of like like a hover ship of sorts. So it's really cool to see those elements that they incorporated. They could have just had arbitrary floating land masses, just chunks of land in the sky, but they actually kind of tried to give an explanation for it, and you see those kind of mechanical corridors and, the support beams holding everything together. And I think that was a very nice touch. In addition to that, the actual 3 islands, so to speak, that you work with in-game really work to showcase all aspects of Forza's engine. The more tropical rainforest area really shows off the foliage and the rich greens and kind of rainforest that Forza Horizon 5 has really excelled in. And as well, you have the blizzard area, kind of like the tundra and the like the ice caverns and everything. That goes a long way in showing off the snow that obviously we don't not have a lot of in Forza Horizon 5, given this in Mexico. So that was a great way for them to show off, what this new engine or revamp of the engine can do in a setting like that. And then obviously you have the desert, the canyons. It all just looks really cool, and having those 3 different islands really breaks up the experience and gives you a little taste of everything, which I know is a theme carried over from the base game. They touted their different biomes and areas a lot, so it's really cool to see those in the DLC. Another point that I'll make, and this is really niche, and this is probably only for me, but I love the fact that they brought some fan favorite cars, and in my case, the Diora 2. which was always my favorite Hot Wheel growing up. I really enjoyed it when it was in the Hot Wheels World Race, the Highway 35 collection, if any of you remember that. And it was my favorite vehicle from that as well. So getting to drive that and actually, hear that the engine rev up in a game and everything and drive it like it was a real car is really cool for me. So again, that's more of a niche thing for me, but definitely something I wanted to include because there are a couple Hot Wheels cars introduced in this DLC, and there just might be your favorite car included as well. Now, I will touch kind of on the downside of this later in the cons in terms of the cars introduced in the game, so we'll hold off on that until that part of the video. Another big pro for me was the varied track layouts. I really did enjoy all of the crazy loops and twists and turns and jumps, and especially the new water slide and frozen tracks that kind of broke up the gameplay and mixed up how you play the game. Obviously, there is also the wind tracks that essentially just act like a speed boost for you. Those weren't as unique, and they were just kind of cool things in certain areas of the map, but I really enjoyed the water slide and frozen tracks since they actually introduced something new to the gameplay, and you had to mix up how you were racing on those tracks. I also really enjoyed the off-road section, so they incorporated a lot of sections, entire chunks of land that aren't covered by tracks or anything, and essentially just land that you can drive over just like in the base game, especially for kind of cross-country races, stuff like that. And I really enjoyed those sections because you truly feel like you get to use all of the land mass that maybe you didn't have so much in Forza Horizon 3. That was really just the tracks, and that was about it. So yeah, it was really cool to be able to drive over that, have cross-country races, and everything like that. The next thing is I really enjoyed the Hot Wheels elements that they brought to the car customization, which was not something that I had expected going in. I expected them to bring new cars to the mix, but I did not expect them to bring new customization options, which they brought in the Spectra Flame paint, which is, I guess, literally copyrighted and kind of patented by the Hot Wheels company. So that was really cool. They also brought over Hot Wheels wheels and Hot Wheels tires, like a red striped tire that you can add to all your vehicles. So that's really cool. I know a lot of people have built, kind of Hot Wheels replica builds and everything like that. So that's all really cool, especially if you have a car that you enjoy now that you want to add some of these elements to and make it kind of look like a Hot Wheel. I thought that was a nice touch to add, and I hope they do that more going forward in future DLCs. The new Hot Wheels story is actually pretty informative. It wasn't the most robust story, and again, we'll get to that in the con section and definitely in the rating categories. But it was pretty informative. There was still a little bit of that Forza Horizon cheese in the dialogue itself, but I thought they took a decent look at the Hot Wheels lore, if you want to call it that, the history behind the Hot Wheels company and how everything was developed, and kind of presented it as best they could in the context of the game. Another pro that I had found were the tracks are a lot more casual and a little more cinematic and action oriented. The tracks aren't just how well you can hit an apex or worrying about your traction going into a hairpin turn or anything like that. A lot of it's just pin the pedal to the metal and just do crazy loops and gravity defying stunts, and really just have a good time playing it. So obviously, again, this is something we're going to touch on some of the downside to that later on, but I think just as an overall point, it is extremely fun to be able to play like that, and maybe not so have to worry so much about intricate racing lines and more just genuinely enjoying yourself as you're going over these crazy tracks. It's also a little easier to play when you had a long day and you just want to sit down and kind of relax and play something fun, a little more casual. And at the end of the day, that makes a couple more cars feasible. You don't have to have super meta builds to win some of these races. You can kind of dust off some cars that maybe you'd never used before. I know I did, especially in the S2 class. I got to use some of those hypercars that before were nothing but speed machines. But ultimately were useful with these tracks and with these race layouts and everything. And finally, the last thing in my pro category, the game is just overall very fun to play. I'm a huge fan of Forza Horizon in general, just the series overall. But this DLC is just a lot of fun, which is something in a video game nowadays that I find myself missing a lot. I'm worried more about, how many challenges there are to complete, how much, hours of gameplay there is and everything. But not too often does a game make me kind of slow down and remember that it's all about having fun again. And this game definitely did. More so than anything else, it was just a joy to play. And so that's something that I cannot overstate enough as a positive. Some cons, obviously, we got to get to some of the negatives. It's not all sunshine or rainbows, unfortunately. One of the first things I noticed there are a lot of reused assets of the overworld in kind of the off-road sections that I had mentioned before, which isn't a huge deal, but there was a couple times where I'm like, I raced on this exact hill back in Mexico, in the base game, and so it kind of sucks to see, but at the end of the day, it's not a game ruining thing by any means, and you can't expect them to come up with entirely new things. At the end of the day, some stuff has to get recycled. In terms of audio and visual bugs, game breaking bugs, I didn't run into that many. The game is pretty polished overall, but the few that I did run into were a little annoying, mainly just visual bugs, and the audio kind of glitches out sometimes when it thinks you're in a cavern or it thinks you're in a tunnel of sorts, and that kind of threw me off a couple times. In honesty, the audio is not great for a lot of the sections, the map, especially the new terrain that they tried incorporating some echo effects, and sometimes that would bug out as well and kind of get even worse than it was before. But on to, honestly, kind of my biggest gripe with the game is there's just not enough new Hot Wheels vehicles. With a Hot Wheels licensed DLC and games such as Hot Wheels Unleashed, which I enjoyed back this spring, I kind of wish that there'd be actual more licensed vehicles, maybe 15 or 20 classics from the series, cars that I grew up playing with. Not just, it seems like they kind of added, a couple of those cars, and then they just slapped in a bunch of cars that they had ready that they were just going to add to the car pass or the seasonal, reward sections, but they just slapped in the DLC because they had them physically scanned in and working in game, so they figured they'd fill out the content. I do wish to see I wish to see more actual Hot Wheels vehicles, and I hope that maybe in the future those are added as seasonal content or something, to keep this DLC alive. Another big thing to me was the lower tiers of the campaign go by a little quickly. So I kind of touched on the fact that it does add a little bit of much needed progression to the game that wasn't there before. But unfortunately, the lower ranks, like the B class and A class, they're kind of skewed so that you level up almost like you would in an RPG in terms of, the lower levels you go through really quickly, which is cool and all, and I understand why they did that, so that you could unlock the faster cars and start using the cars that you really want to use quicker. But it kind of, undercut the whole point of making a progression system, because, you had to start out with slow cars, but after maybe an hour of gameplay tops, you were already out of that bracket anyways and onto the same cards that you were using back in Mexico. So, that it's kind of rough, but at the same time, I do applaud them for at least trying to add some progression to the game, especially since that's been kind of the community's big gripe with the game. That's too sandboxy and not enough progression. So, and to kind of go along with that, the game difficulty is really skewed in this game. Sometimes it is hard or almost impossible to beat the AI, just because the way the AI is set up in this game, a lot of the times there's one or two designated turns in a course that they take either really slowly or really poorly in terms of racing line. And it's almost like the game wants you to succeed and beat the AI in those specific turns. If you don't beat them on those turns, you're never going to beat them the rest of the race. Or if you don't beat them by 40% through the race, they just pull ahead to such a degree that you'll never catch them again. And these tracks don't have a whole lot of those opportunities. And especially with it being a lot less technical, like I touched on in the first section, there's not a lot of tight turns or turns that you'll take better than the AI will, that you can pass people. So sometimes it is almost impossible to pass people, and I found myself restarting a lot of races, even though I raced them near flawlessly, just because the AI just got ahead and never took his foot off the gas and just raced the whole way to the finish line. And another kind of thing to tack onto that is winning a race is almost entirely about raw speed now, because the tracks are less technical, and you can carry speed into almost every corner, and everything like that, especially in the lower tiers, S1 and A class. It's really less about building a car well and tuning it really well, and more so about what's the fastest car that you can physically put on the track. I know there were several races where I picked the car that had won me dozens of races back in the base game and was built incredibly and would smoke any other car in that performance index. But suddenly in this DLC, I could not get past like 5th place when using it, because ultimately they were built for corners and acceleration out of turns, stuff like that you would see in a normal race. But in this game, that's really not how it is. So you'll have to start picking cars that are more built for just raw speed. I started using cars that honestly, I could never win a base game race in, but in this one, since I never needed to put my foot on the brake, I won easily because they had a super high top speed. So I kind of get that that's the point of Hot Wheels, right? Everything's super fast and kind of uncompromising, just pedal to the floor kind of stuff. So I definitely understand why it's set up like that. But for someone that's a little more technical, it is a little frustrating and unfortunate, and I'm sure once I get into the rivals portion, I usually start doing that once I run out of content. I'll see a little more nuance in that fact, and I might walk this point back a little bit. But overall, it just seems like put as much horsepower into the vehicle as possible and physically outrun everyone else on the track. I also feel, kind of stepping away from that point, I also feel that new track types were not implemented enough. We talked in the pros category of how much I enjoyed the new track types, whether it be the water slide track or the ice track, but they're just not implemented enough, in my mind, and not implemented in creative enough ways. So I feel like they were more of a gimmick sometimes than they needed to be. And lastly, the last con that I want to talk about is the physics can be really wonky at times. I get that they had to, move sliders around and change how the physics engine worked, to justify a car climbing a 200-foot, vertical climb. But it just gets really wonky sometimes, and you don't carry speed the way that you think you're going to and everything like that. So it's a little bit disconcerting. So now we're just going to move into kind of the ratings that I have to give portions of the game. And I'm going to do this for all my reviews going forward as well, just so I can kind of grade every game or every DLC on the same basic principles, to see how they stack up amongst one another. So to start out with here, visuals, I'll give this a 9 out of 10. Again, it is a very beautiful game, and they did a great job at crafting a world that you want to drive around in. And that is extremely varied. Again, everything from ice to bone dry canyons to beautiful rainforests and, volcanoes, and there's dragons in the trees sometimes. It's all very great and it looks amazing. Honestly, if it wasn't for the few visual glitches that I saw, and maybe a little denser foliage, I'd probably give this a 10 out of 10, to be completely honest. In terms of just gameplay and fun, I give it an 8 out of 10. Some of the, again, it is kind of the same song and dance as the base game, so I had to knock a couple points for it being a little bit repetitive, but at the end of the day, it's a racing game, so you have to expect that it's going to be repetitive, and I still had an incredible amount of fun with this. So overall, again, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 for general gameplay. In terms of progression or sense of accomplishment with the game, I had to unfortunately give this a 6.5 out of 10. I applaud them for trying to add a progression system to the game in terms of locking down what cars you use at certain points of the game, and that's definitely an improvement over the base game. However, again, the progression is kind of short-lived, and it just turns into checking boxes on challenges, much like the accolade system that in my mind is not that great. And in terms of sense of accomplishment, there is, the feeling of driving across every road, opening up the whole map, advancing through the different tiers and going through all of the showcase events. That's all great. But again, I just think Forza is still struggling in that progression system, right? It's trying too hard to be a power fantasy sandbox game, which I enjoy. I don't have a problem with, but unfortunately, I do still have to take points off for that. A game like Need for Speed or some of the older story-driven racing games just did a much better at a sense of progression and actual accomplishment than Horizon does, unfortunately. In terms of value for your money, for what you pay for it versus what you get out of it, I give this an 8.5 out of 10. Now, for me, I will say that it was a really great deal. I got it through the Game Pass Ultimate Edition. So essentially, for $45 before the game launched, you could get the game like 4 days early. You got the game free with Game Pass. Obviously, I have Game Pass. And then you got both DLCs, a car pass, like a bunch of VIP stuff. So it's hard to tell how much I actually paid for this DLC. I'm guessing probably around $10 of that $45, if you had to kind of itemize everything. So I think for the deal that I got, it's an incredible deal. I know that they had the bundles kind of on sale at one point as well. If you bought, both DLCs, the other one is still yet to be announced, but so I think it's a great monetary value, right? It's not a huge amount of money, and you get a decent amount of content out of it. And as we'll touch in later in my conclusion, it gives you a nice differentiation, right? You can load up Forza now and either just play the base game or go to the Hot Wheels island, so to speak. And it kind of breaks up your gameplay a little bit, gives you a little bit extra to do each week. So hopefully you'll be able to put in a bunch of hours. I know I have a couple dozen in it already. So, in my mind, if it's at least $1 per hour of gameplay, it's well worth it. And lastly, we have story. So some games that I rate with this system, the story will be much higher. Forza Horizon, unfortunately, does a terrible job with story. And if it wasn't for the fact that I really liked some of the Hot Wheels history in the Hot Wheels story missions, I would have had to give this like a 1 or 1.5 out of 10. As you know, the dialogue is horrendously cringy, like horribly so. And there really is no story other than suddenly a track appeared out of nowhere and you shoot in a like little launcher up to the island and then you're there. And they kind of loosely base it around like the organizer of the event has wanted to build a theme park, and this is her building a theme park. It's very loose and Forza Horizon-y. Again, if any of you have played the series before, you'll know just how kind of cobbled together and poor it is. So there's no real story, obviously no character development, anything like that. It is a racing game, so you have to kind of lower your standards on that. But in comparing it to anything else I'd play, I have to give this, unfortunately, a 3 out of 10. So that kind of wraps up the various scores for the different categories. So I just wanted to sum up overall. I definitely recommend getting this DLC, especially if you were a fan of the base game or you've been a fan of Forza Horizon games in the past. And definitely if you have Game Pass. If you have Game Pass and you haven't downloaded Forza Horizon 5, you need to get on that immediately. Even non-racing game fans are going to love it. I think there's a lot there for everyone to enjoy. And adding on this DLC for possibly a few bucks more, excuse me, super worth it. And I think it honestly will provide you a lot of fun. It was a great first add-on to the game that really, capitalizes on Forza Horizon 5's brand new graphics and, added a little more fun factor. The game was kind of getting stale, and this DLC really just gave it that ounce of adrenaline, that ounce of fun that it needed, and really spice things up. And again, one of the best things too is I'm really happy that it did introduce a little bit of progression. Hopefully, we see a little bit more in future Forza games that can make you feel a little bit more like you're working through a career or working your way up the ranks like the first game did. But we'll have to see as that goes forward. So overall, I definitely recommend getting it. And while I wish that it leaned a little more heavily into the Hot Wheels on the car side of things, I still had a crap load of fun with it, and I'm sure you guys will too. So yeah, that's about it. I appreciate you guys sticking around. I wanted to give you guys more of an in-depth review, so I apologize if this was a little wordy, a little long, but I will be posting some more future content from this, as well as possibly streaming some Rivals runs, some weekly, challenges, everything like that over on Twitch. So yeah, other than that, if you guys have enjoyed and you believe this review has been helpful, definitely leave a like below and subscribe for more Forza Horizon content, as well as several other games and live stream clips from my Twitch channel. So once again, this has been Crunchy Frog. I appreciate you guys coming out, and you all have a great day.